Dogs. Considered man's best friend for centuries, but today we commonly consider them family. This is Melody and Luna. They're my dogs, and they're still with us, but unfortunately, a buddy at my day job lost his longtime furry friend and asked me to make him an urn for him. I'm about to show you exactly how I made that urn for his four-legged family member out of this cherry and old air-dried walnut. So let's get to it. I like marking pre-milled wood with a pencil so I can see exactly how much I'm removing per pass on the jointer and planer. This walnut, on the other hand, is rough and it has a major lump in the middle, so it'll be a bit easier to see what I'm working with throughout the milling process. I've honestly had both of these boards sitting around my shop for the past couple of years, so they're well acclimated and ready to work with. I began by surfacing one face on each board at the jointer to obtain a nice reference surface for the planer. I make sure to take shallow cuts on each pass to avoid chip out and dust clogs in the dust collector. After each board had a flat face, I moved my fence in to have minimal exposure to the blade. I ran both boards through on one edge to obtain a straight 90-degree edge for the table saw later. If I still have your attention, remember liking the video is completely free and does this video a great service to the algorithm. Before planing everything to thickness, I wanted to save some time by using the bandsaw first. This is my sticker wall on the bandsaw. If you have a sticker for your business or brand, hit me up in the comments and I'll throw one on this thing. Make sure to start your comment with the word sticker wall and I'll reach out with an address. One day I want the whole thing covered, so make sure you jump in on the action. The reason I wanted to use the bandsaw in the milling process is to resaw the weird lump in the walnut to save considerable time at the planer. I locked the fence in place and removed that lump rather quickly. If you don't have a lot of milling tools like I do, you could skip this whole milling process just by buying S3S lumber. So as long as you have a table saw, you could do most of this project pretty easily. Once satisfied with the removal, I pulled out the planer to get everything to thickness. I typically don't care about exact thickness, but somehow, without trying or measuring, I got these boards to exactly 3/4 of an inch thick. For you metric users, that's roughly 19 millimeters. See the sticker on the planer? I make sure I put that in all of my YouTube thumbnails so it's easy to find my videos. So keep an eye out for it in the future when you're scrolling through YouTube looking for what videos to watch. After getting both boards to equal thickness, I ripped them to 5.5 inches wide at the table saw. This is technically the height of the box without the lid. This is also the final stage of the milling process, so I could get started on actually building the dang thing. Once they were both ripped to the same width, I could set up my table saw for cross-cutting with a miter gauge. You could use a miter saw as well. I used my incremiter gauge, but any will do. I like to remove excess ends first. These are typically the ends with planer snipe or any sort of defect I don't want in the project. Once I created that nice 90-degree clean edge, I marked out 9 inches for the front and back portions of the box. Exact measurements aren't needed as long as they're both the same, but I still like to practice making out a line with a square and setting up my cuts to that line. It's good to practice these techniques whenever possible. It'll make you more ready for it when the need arises. Look at it, smooth as butter, right on the line. I cut the walnut to shorter lengths as it'll be on the sides. I think it was around 5 inches or so. Once every piece was cut to size, I decided to add a bit of personalization at the CNC. This isn't necessary. There are plenty of urns and boxes out there without engravings or images. I was just asked to do this for a particular project. I spent a long time woodworking without a CNC, and this tool has already paid itself off. Whether or not you believe it's quote-unquote real woodworking, it's freaking cool what it can do. I used a bit named the Groovy Jenny, which has a 60-degree tip. This angle is not perfect for engraving, but this bit cuts extremely well and stays sharp for a long time. Off camera, I designed the engraving file and uploaded it to the CNC's brain. From there, it's as simple as turning it on and pressing play. In about 15 minutes, I had a nice engraving to fill with color after cleaning it up with a Dremel and a soft wire brush attachment. Typically, I'd use epoxy for this, but I decided to use CA glue as a quicker method. Since this is not deep or structural, CA glue works fine here. Epoxy takes way too long to dry for my liking, so I avoid it whenever possible. If you do this yourself, just make sure to fill it in with small increments and build it up over time. To save time, I ran this through the drum sander. This saves about 30 minutes of carefully sanding the engraving to perfection. Another step to clean up the engraving is to use a card scraper. It's not necessary, but it's super helpful in getting a nice finish. Jumping to the joinery. I decided basic rabbets would work here. They're strong, easy to keep square, and I had an idea to make them appear as if it were a butt joint. My preferred method is a straight bit on the router table, but the right blade or a dado stack on the table saw will do the same job. Using a backer piece to avoid tear out, I cut out the rabbets with multiple passes. These are for the sides only. After achieving the correct depth, I kept the bit at the same height and adjusted the fence inward to cut channels for the bottom and lid to fit in. These were cut on the top and bottoms of all 4 pieces. This is what a rabbet joint looks like before gluing up. I always test fit pieces before permanently securing them together. I've learned this the hard way more than once. I was initially going to use the leftover walnut as the top and bottom, but I had these book-matched figured maple pieces from a recent project and they were the perfect size. I first ripped them to fit to length, but I wanted to keep the book-matched center line, well, centered. So I used a square and marked out the correct distance from the center on both sides and used the table saw fence to cut them accordingly. I like to over-measure things and take off small bites to get that super tight fit. A tight fit isn't the final step though. I get them to fit extremely tight, so after sanding and finishing it fits perfect. Whenever I glue up boxes or anything with inside corners, I prefer to use blue tape to help prevent glue squeeze out from staining the inside. It's a little bit of work, but this step saves a bunch of time sanding and chiseling out all of the glue in the future. Using a razor, I'm able to get all of the tape exactly where it needs to be without obstructing the glue joint. While strategically and carefully placing the glue line in the contact areas, I started the initial glue up. To help keep things square, I placed one of the maple pieces in the bottom rabbets. Once dried, I removed all of the clamps and using my world-renowned karate skills, I softly and peacefully removed the unglued bottom portion. As a decorative touch, I used this large table-edge router bit from Whiteside to create a pillowed edge profile on the tops and bottoms. This thing is huge, so slowing down the router speed and taking small passes is crucial for shop safety and clean cuts without burning. I won't spend much time showing me sand everything, but here's some proof that I did. All I used here was 120 and 180 grit, and off camera I hand sanded all the hard to reach spots. I could have went to 220 grit, but there's nothing much of a difference for the type of finish I planned on using later. For the bottom panel, I only added glue to the center portions to allow it to expand and contract so the box wouldn't buckle over time. To soften up the top, I rounded over the edges with a 1/4 inch roundover bit, and once again taking small bites and multiple passes to avoid tear out. For the final touches, I decided to paint the whole thing black and cover up all of the beautiful wood grain and hard work. Not really. I'm just applying a black adhesive to the interior for some black flocking fibers. Flocking material adds a fancy touch to all types of projects, and I figured since this will be holding a loved fur baby's ashes, fancy is the way to go. I used a sponge applicator to reach into those tight corners easily and made sure the adhesive was spread evenly, avoiding clumping and all made streaks. Using a flocking applicator tube thingy, I just doused the whole interior with as much product as possible until all of the sheen from the adhesive was gone. After the adhesive dried, I set up a box with parchment paper to pour out all of the excess flocking fibers. That way, any fibers that didn't stick to the adhesive, I could save for later use while simultaneously avoiding a big mess. Moving back to the maple lid. I wanted a simple brass knob for it, so I used a straight edge from corner to corner to find the center. Using a hand drill, I carefully drilled out the center hole for the knob to fit through. I made sure to go slow to avoid tear out on the opposite side, and I always test fit the knobs afterwards. It was finally time for finish, which I went with Odie's oil for its easy application. I jump back and forth between Rubio and Odie's often, and really there's no reason. It's all easy and they both smell great while leaving a nice looking finish. If you stuck around this far, be sure to click the like button and leave a comment about your favorite pet or your favorite woodworking project. I have plenty of builds being filmed as we speak, and I hope to catch y'all on the next video, so subscribe to the channel to not miss out. Thanks for watching and happy building.